From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
15 and counting, the number of Democrats who think they are the best choice to replace Congressman David Cicilline. Among them, former state representative Aaron Regunberg. The outspoken Democrat has garnered endorsements from some state lawmakers, but he's already received blowback from various groups questioning his progressive credentials. How will he separate himself from a crowded field? Our guest this week on Newsmakers, congressional candidate Aaron Regunberg. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, Target 12 investigator Steph Machado and Aaron Regunberg, candidate for Congress. Welcome to the program. It's good to have you back.
Great to be here, Tim.
I want to start with that topic that I talked about in the beginning there. Not so many years ago, you were seen as a leading progressive in Rhode Island politics, but since you've announced, there have been some backlash from the left. A number of prominent progressives sent a remarkable joint letter accusing you of being in politics not to help others, but to help yourself. And just this week, the Democratic Socialists came out with a statement about your votes as a state lawmaker and criticized you for aligning yourself with former Speaker Nick Mattiello. Why have you angered so many people who used to be your allies?
Well, Tim, it's no secret that I've had political disagreements, as you know, with these particular groups, the Political Cooperative and the DSA. We've got very different approaches to politics. You know, when I was first elected in 2014, I organized community meetings in my district to ask my constituents what kind of legislator did they want me to be. And the answer I got overwhelmingly was they wanted me to work, including with people I didn't always agree with, to get big things done. So that's always been my approach. That's how I led the passage of paid sick days legislation and increased the tip minimum wage for the first time in 20 years in our state, and created new clean energy and virtual net metering and community solar programs, and pushed for prison reform and expanded harm reduction strategies for folks struggling with addiction. I'm really proud of that progressive record. I'm proud of the progressive leaders and women and people of color who've endorsed our campaign, and organizations just this week. Our Revolution, which is the organization that Bernie Sanders founded, endorsed our campaign because they know that I'm the candidate with the strongest record of progressive achievement. I'm the only candidate who has a history of fighting for Medicare for all.
But it's
and
one thing
universal
for
healthcare.
it's one thing for a group to not support your candidacy, but they have been outright hostile to you about this and been outspoken. Has that surprised you, their reaction to your candidacy?
I was vocal with my concerns with some of these groups. I wrote an op-ed in the Boston Globe last year after they had recruited some really concerning candidates to run against progressive legislators. Again, it's a different approach to politics. And as I've been talking to voters for the last month in our community, in our district, no one wants to talk about this kind of intra-party sniping. Folks want to hear about the solutions that we have.
Does it harm you, though, in the race, or does it harm Democrats in general to have, or I should say, does it harm progressives to have all of this sort of sniping? I mean, the DSA, which is the Democratic Socialists of America, said, we believe there's currently no left-wing candidate in the Rhode Island 1st Congressional District special election. What do you make of that?
I mean, it's interesting. In my previous races, I think there have been some people who, because I've always run on a bold, progressive, ambitious platform, and that's always been the work that I've done in the legislature, I think there have been people who've thought, oh, maybe he's a little too progressive for me. I think what this kind of flack that I've been getting from these far left groups shows is that my approach is actually to work with folks to work with anyone, including folks I don't always agree with, to actually get things done. That, to me, is the work that we need to be doing in Washington right now. People are struggling, people need real solutions, and my fight has always been, how do we actually solve real problems to help working people in our state?
I want to ask you about your decision to get in the race. When David Cicilline announced that he would be stepping down, a lot of people, including yourself, said, it's time to send a woman to Congress, and you even sent out a tweet that you later deleted saying, this isn't my race. Some strong progressive women who care about climate are exploring running, so that's good enough for me. Why did you change your mind?
By the way, I deleted that tweet like an hour later because I realized I was still clerking and I shouldn't be commenting on politics. I think that identity and representation are really important. That's why I've spent close to 15 years helping to elect a number of women and people of color here in Rhode Island. And I think it's really exciting that in this race, we have so many people who are stepping forward, bringing different backgrounds and experiences to the table. I think everyone in this race brings something special to the table. And for me, I think what I bring is is a record of winning real change that has a real impact for regular Rhode Islanders, whether it was as a state legislator, whether it was as a community organizer, supporting students to make changes in our public schools, most recently as a climate lawyer, supporting litigation to hold big oil companies accountable for their climate crimes. I've been fighting these fights for a long time, and that's the work that I think we need to be doing in Congress.
Just so people know, you were clerking for a federal court judge as a law school grad. I want to dive into some policies now. The debt ceiling, we're just over, 2 weeks away from the country potentially defaulting on its debt if Congress does not raise the debt ceiling. President Biden and Republican members of the House are playing a game of fiscal chicken, I would say. If you were in Congress right now, would you be open to spending cuts in exchange for raising the debt ceiling?
I want to push back on saying that it is a game of fiscal chicken, because I think that chicken has two sides who are running together. And that's not what's happening here. This is a shameful example of Republicans holding our economy hostage in order to try to enact what would be devastating spending cuts, right? These are programs that Rhode Islanders rely on. These are the difference between a family being able to put food on the table or their kids going hungry.
Yeah, but you know what, Aaron, for people at home, it is not unreasonable, even if they usually vote for a Democratic candidate, it's not unreasonable to say, well, look, inflation is so high, the nation's debt is so high, we should be looking at reducing the national spending. And that's not an unreasonable request by Republicans to have a conversation about which areas to explore in cutting.
I don't think we're having a conversation here. I mean, they're
certainly not.
Holding the economy hostage, and the programs that they're talking about, let's be clear, these are nutritious
Would you be open to any cuts? I know there are programs you want to protect. Is there anything you would be willing to cut?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of programs in our government, which is a government that, as we know, corporate money has way too strong a voice in, that don't go to the public good, that are profiting private interests. There's a lot of conversations to be had there, but I don't think this is the way. And I think luckily our Constitution has actually contemplated this kind of brinksmanship.
14th Amendment?
That's right. I'm a lawyer. I've studied constitutional law. I think Republicans in Congress too often don't seem to be following the Constitution.
So you think the 14th Amendment... So let's touch on this. 14th Amendment, most people know it as due process, equal protection, but in Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, it basically says a country can't default on its debt. Not the exact wording. I don't have it in front of me. But there's a lot of legal scholars who say, because there are other parts of the Constitution that say Congress holds the purse strings. They are the ones that can spend the country's money, taxpayers' money. You think the 14th Amendment, the president can invoke that in this situation? And I guess the bigger question is, should he?
I think that if Republicans continue with this game and continue to try to run our economy off a cliff, that the president should invoke as you said, Section 4 of the 14th Amendment. It says that the validity of the United States debt shall not be questioned. The debt ceiling is a piece of legislation which is hierarchically under the Constitution. By the way, the fiscal year budget that Congress passed is also legislation, and it would also be illegal for the government to not enforce and enact that legislation, which is the budget that Congress voted on. So again, if Republicans are continuing with this game, are continuing to threaten, again, we're talking about Pell Grants for students, we're talking about Head Start seats for children in our communities, then I think the president should invoke his authority under the 14th Amendment, continue paying the United States bills while we work out the long-term solution.
Staying on the policy front, you've been a longtime supporter of immigrant rights. Earlier this week, the policy known as Title 42 expired, which if folks don't know, was the policy of sending migrants back to Mexico or their home countries when they tried to cross the border and ask for asylum. This was a pandemic-era policy, but the Biden administration is insisting the border is not open. They're telling people not to come over the border and claim asylum, but rather to apply online from their home countries. If you're in Congress, what will you propose for immigration and specifically border policy?
Well, I don't think that we should be extending Title 42. That's a program that was designed by Stephen Miller under the Trump administration. For me, this is an issue that's informed by my own family's experience. My grandfather was born in Rosenberg, Germany in 1930, and he became a refugee from the Holocaust. He survived. Many of his family members did not, because while they were trying to get out from under the Nazi regime, they were blocked by countries that had strict quotas on the number of Jews that they would accept. He eventually made it here in 1948, looking for freedom and opportunity and safety, like so many have since. And to me, I think it's really, really important that we need to be pushing for comprehensive immigration reform, first of all, right? We need to create pathways to citizenship for the folks who are here. We need to create pathways for folks who are trying to escape from the kind of oppression and violence that my grandfather tried to escape from. And we need to understand and appreciate everything that immigration does for our communities, right? Think about the culture, the economic impact. In Rhode Island, we wouldn't have a second congressional seat if not for more recent immigration. And this is a state that has been built by waves of immigration over the generations.
In your mind, does comprehensive immigration reform include a strong southern border where people are not allowed to cross, or how would you handle the border?
I don't think any Democrats are saying we should have totally open borders, but we need to be fair, and we need to be informed by humanitarian principles, and we need to be trying to address the larger problems that are causing folks to come here.
The Supreme Court has been under the microscope with revelations that Justice Clarence Thomas accepted lavish trips funded by a Republican megadonor who also provided paid private school tuition for a grandnephew that Thomas was raising as a child. On your website, you wrote, "Justice Thomas must be impeached." Got to ask you, where was this outrage when Justice Breyer took 225 trips paid for by others, or Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg got a freebie trip to Israel from an Israeli billionaire?
I think that what we're seeing right now, first of all, we should be binding every Supreme Court justice to the same code of ethics that all other federal judges have, that the judge that I just clerked for has to abide by. This isn't, I think, just about Justice Thomas. I made that call because I think it is shameful the way that his corrupt behavior has undermined the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. I mean, we're talking about organizations and leaders who have clear business, ideological and business and economic business in front of the court, who are giving these lavish gifts. The Leonard Leo.
Yeah, Harlan Crow didn't have direct business before the court, and that's who the billionaires that I referenced.
Well, he had one. There was one case that was direct.
It was pretty minor.
He's on the board of the American Enterprise Institute, which is constantly in front of the Supreme Court, pushing its ideological agenda. Leonard Leo, who pushed for his organization to write a check to Ginny Thomas without mentioning her for $25,000. That was right before they put up a Supreme Court brief. I think that when any justice is holding themselves above the law, we need to use the tools that we have to reassert democratic accountability. But I agree with you that this isn't just about Justice Thomas. I mean, these are deeper problems. The issue here is that our courts, which are the least democratically accountable branch of our government, have been wielding in recent years outsized power, and they've been doing it in really unaccountable ways. We saw that last month when a Trump appointee in Texas tried to cut off national access to critical abortion medication with a legally indefensible opinion. And so I think there are structural issues that we should be addressing. We should be requiring a supermajority of the Supreme Court to overturn legislation that was enacted and passed by a democratically elected Congress. We should be having term limits for Supreme Courts. We should be stopping a single justice.
What about expansion of Supreme Court? David Cicilline has proposed that 9 to 13, I think, his bill.
I think that is absolutely something that we should be considering.
Speaking of Congressman Cicilline, have you spoken to him about your run, and have you asked for his endorsement?
I have spoken to him about the run and asked for his advice. He is not getting involved in the campaign.
You don't think he's going to endorse it at all?
No, I mean, he's going to the Rhode Island Foundation, and I think they would prefer him to not be engaged in partisan politics as he's entering into a nonprofit world. I do
want to very briefly go back in time, because in 2018, you were 2 percentage points away from beating Dan McKee in the lieutenant governor's primary. If that race had gone a little bit differently, you might have become the governor, succeeding Governor Raimondo when she left office early. I'm just wondering what you think of the job McKee has done as governor of Rhode Island.
You know, I've tried to be a good loser and not be too critical of the administration. There have been a number of areas where I've had concerns. I mean, even just recently with the open meetings law, the sort of step back from transparency, that was a big issue of concern, and there have been a lot of those things. But I also, I wish the best for the administration, because if they do well, Rhode Island does well. So I've tried to
think you'd be able
wish
to
them
work
well.
with him if you were in the delegation and he's the governor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, politics is politics. I think nothing's personal. That's been always my approach, and I hope that's everyone's approach.
We have to end this conversation pretty soon here, Aaron, but I am curious. President Biden announced that he's running again. Not everybody in your party's happy about that. Biden will be in his, mid-80s at the end of his second term if he wins. Do you support his re-election bid, or would you like to see a fresh face?
I support the president's re-election bid. I don't think that we're going to see a primary. I think we need to be united in going up against the most extreme and terrifying Republican Party that I've ever seen. I mean, my wife and I have a 2-year-old, and like a lot of parents, I spend a lot of time worrying about the future. And the idea of Republicans winning back control of the White House, to me, is horrifying. And I think we've seen some really big progressive wins over this administration. In a lot of ways, more wins than we've had since maybe FDR's administration. There's been things I've taken issue with and not supported. But I think Democrats, as always, need to come together and fight. And that's been my approach. As much as I am a strong progressive and I'm fighting for bold progressive solutions, I think we need to also come together and work together.
Running for Congress with a 2-year-old at home. Oof, that is, I don't envy you on that one. Aaron Regunberg, candidate for Congress, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
When we come back, we'll break down this race further with 12 News political analyst Joe Fleming. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, joined by Steph Machado from Target 12 and 12 News political analyst Joe Fleming. Joe, we discussed the state of CD1 on the program last week. We had Kara Cromwell, a political strategist, and I did want to hear from you. I mean, we're at 15 Democrats so far running to replace Congressman Cicilline. The number, I think, is 17 if you include those who are exploring it. So, I mean, the field is ridiculous. How would you assess the state of the race right now?
Well, the first thing to keep in mind is the primary is a little more than 3.5 months away.
That's crazy.
And you have 15 to 17 candidates. None of them have really made any impact with the voters of the 1st Congressional District up to this point. They're all basically trying to raise money, build an organization, and we're getting ready to come into summer, which makes it more difficult. So the race, I believe, is wide open at this point. You've got a number of candidates. I think we're going to see at the end of June who actually returns papers and files. I don't expect to see 50, and I expect to see it down to maybe single digits. But there's still going to be a great number of candidates. And who's going to have the money to get a message out?
And what kind of money are we talking about, Joe?
I would think you're going to want to have at least $500,000 to really get your message across. Because keep this in mind, in the summertime, TV isn't watched that much. So you have to do a lot of TV media buys.
Except this show.
Except for this show, obviously, to get your message across. Also, we're expecting a small turnout, which means a lot of grassroots, get out the vote operation type of thing. Identifying your voters and get them to the polls in the primary. That takes money to hire people to go out, knock on doors for you to find your voters. So money's going to be a factor in this race. If you can't raise enough, you may get out of it come the end of June, or you may have $100,000 you can raise. The question is, can you raise that second and third $100,000? That's going to be the problem for some of these people.
What's your turnout prediction, Joe?
I've been saying between 30 and 40,000. In 2022, in the 1st Congressional District, in the Democratic primary, it was a little over 100,000 voters. But again, there's not a lot of enthusiasm right now. The large field may generate more voters, but I don't see a real huge turnout coming out for this primary.
With that type of turnout, though, I mean, I know you say $500,000 is probably the price tag, but you could conceivably win this race without cracking 10,000 votes.
Absolutely. If the numbers stay 15 to 17 people, you could win this without cracking 10,000. And again, you could do that without the $500,000.
That's what I'm saying.
A strong grassroots campaign, but you need some money to get that going. So, in a race like this, it's going to be hard to do like polling to find out where people are, because pockets of voters could make a big difference in this race if you get them out in your community.
How important a role will endorsements play in this race? Now, we talked to Aaron Regunberg in the first half. You asked him about David Cicilline. Would he endorse? I don't think Congressman Cicilline would endorse pre-primary unless there's some logjam that has to be broken. But even then,
there's some sort of urgent reason.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I think he said because he's going in the foundation, he will not endorse. He's
It's a
out of politics.
nonpartisan
Right.
group.
They don't endorse until they do. But what the
Yeah.
Congressman Cicilline off to the side, I think we all agree he probably won't. How big a role do endorsements
Well, I think we're
play?
seeing right now a lot of groups basically holding back. There's been some state reps, senators endorsing, some organizations endorsing, but not big ones. I'm looking to see the impact could be labor. If labor stays together and supports one candidate, they could have an impact.
Because they come with a ground game, don't they?
They come with a ground game, and a lot of voters, they know who their voters are. The question is, will they stay together? I get the feeling they may support a couple different candidates. The other group is the mayors in the 1st Congressional District. If they all support one candidate, they could deliver in their community. They know who their voters are. They could have an impact. I think those types of endorsements could be more powerful than other organizations who are just giving their names. You know, they may give the names, give some money, but these people are the grassroots people, and that could have the big impact in this race.
Pawtucket Mayor Don Gribbian is considering
Right.
running. He hasn't made his decision yet. He's one of those mayors that you talk about.
Right.
He could instantly get some ground game support. I wonder if that puts Governor McKee in a pickle. In your view, Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos has announced. Many people see her, it's tough to say, as the front runner just because she holds
Right.
the highest office of anybody that's running right now. Is that going to put McKee in a bind? Because Gribbian and McKee are very tight.
Yeah, they're very tight. Again, we haven't seen what Don's going to do yet. There's already a state senator from Pawtucket running who Don has supported over the years. So I think it's going to make it more difficult for him to run with the two of them in the race. I think they will both realize they probably can't win that race because they'll be dividing the Pawtucket vote up. So I'm not sure what Dan McKee would do if Don Gribbian got in the race. But I really believe if the mayors all stuck together and they worked for a certain candidate, they could have an impact in this race.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and the big question is who stays in the race and how many candidates do we actually have on the ballot? Because we have 15 right now, but the declaration period isn't until the end of June. Then you have to gather some signatures.
Right.
And will some of the candidates who are similar in both ideologies, but then also who their base is, will they coalesce around one person?
I think some of them might. You got 15 candidates. It'll be really tough to win a race like that because the vote's going to be divided everywhere. I think the number's going to go down. I know Ted said a couple months ago he thinks it'll be 8 in the end. It could be 8. But again, you're right. A lot of these candidates are all the same on the issues. There's very little difference of the issues. So it's more of a personality of who the voters want to support. The one difference is Steve Casey from Woonsocket, who's very conservative in this race. And people say, well, the 1st District's not going to elect somebody very conservative.
Right, he's pro-life.
He's pro-life. He's pro-gun. He's from Woonsocket. So, I mean, he could put a coalition together, the jury number of votes, especially if you have more than 10 candidates running. A small number could win this race. But again, we have to see if we can raise some money and build an organization.
I want to shift gears a little bit to something that made a lot of headlines this week, and that is former President Donald Trump appearing on CNN for a live town hall that was in New Hampshire. What did you make of the former president's appearance on CNN?
Well, I think it's a two-edged sword here. I think Donald Trump appealed to his base of support. They like what they saw. They're very impressed that he's sticking with his guns. On the other hand, the moderate and independent voters, I'm not sure how they took that whole thing. They may say, well, this is the same old Donald Trump. We don't want that again. Keep in mind, in 2020, Donald Trump lost by 7 million votes. Has he done anything to close that gap and get some more of those votes? By the way he's going right now, it seems like he just keeps appealing to his base, and he's not trying to expand his base right now. That may get him through the primary. The question is, how is it going to play in a general election when we get into next year?
Just kind of putting the lens on the media itself. Live interviews, traditionally, you run the risk of making it very difficult to fact check when lies and mistruths are being told, which did happen that night. Again, he talked about how the 2020 election was stolen from him. That is not true. CNN is getting a lot of heat, Steph, for doing this. What do you think? On the flip side, there are people like, well, you can't ignore the guy. He's most likely going to be the GOP candidate for president.
Exactly. And I think Caitlin Collins did an excellent job with an impossible assignment, which she tried to fact check him in real time repeatedly. It was also an audience that was very friendly to some of the things he was saying that were not true. I think that it continues to be very difficult to cover Donald Trump because, again, he is the front runner for the Republican nominee. So I didn't agree with people who were calling on CNN to cancel the event. They're going to have town halls with all of the candidates. Of course it's appropriate to interview the leading Republican candidate for president. But I do think the news media as a whole has to think about, do you cover him live?
Yeah.
Do you
or is it
perhaps
a taped
rely
interview?
on taped interviews where you can fact check what he has said? And it's an ongoing challenge because he is a unique candidate. He created an entire new way of doing politics in the 2016 campaign. And so I think it's an ongoing problem for CNN and for everyone who's going to be covering him in the election.
Yeah, well, bonanza ratings for CNN. I mean, from the business side of things, 30 seconds left, business side of things, it was big for them.
Yeah, they had over 3 million viewers.
Right.
And again, Steph's correct. How do you handle Donald Trump? You can't ignore him. He is the front runner for the Republican nomination. So you have to give him some airtime. There's no question. They're going to give all the candidates airtime.
All right, we got to go. Joe Fleming, Steph Machado, thank you very much for joining us. If you missed any of it, it's on WPRI.com. And a very special Happy Mother's Day out there to everyone, including my mom, who's a big viewer of Newsmakers. Thanks, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.